This is the Rebel Author Podcast, where we talk about books, business, and occasionally bad words. Hello, Rebels, and welcome to episode 212 of the Rebel Author Podcast. Today, I'm talking to Paulette Stout all about how to write controversy. I don't know if you guys remember, but there was a song, 212. It was around whilst I was at university, and I really had to try hard not to say episode 212 because it was one of the songs Chloe and I used to scream at each other. Whilst a little inebriated. Anyway, moving swiftly onwards. Last week's question was, tell me about a skill or party trick you have that would surprise people. So Ian Worrell said, ho, 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 perhaps knocking on my head to make a hollow sound. Oh, I'm sure that's not true. Anyway, this week's question is, what one book do you want to read before the year is out? The book recommendation this week is patron J.P. Rindfleisch the Ninth's book, and this book is Story Hypothesis, the Missing Piece of Your Fiction Puzzle. So I haven't read this yet, but I will be reading it because J.P. is going to come on the show to talk all about Story Hypothesis. So here is the blurb. Does the concept of theme feel like a phantom in your writing process, vaguely present yet elusive and challenging to grasp? Are you an author who has tasted the thrill of finishing that first book or two, but now you're yearning to take your storytelling skills to the next level? Then Story Hypothesis, the missing piece of your fiction puzzle, is the breakthrough guide you've been waiting for. This innovative approach leverages 9 fundamental human needs identified by Manfred Max Neef, providing a clear, easy-to-use statement that serves as a foundation for your story and scenes. With this tool, you'll be able to develop compelling narratives with resonating themes. Stand out from the crowd and make your stories resonate. Let Story Hypothesis be the catalyst for your success. Your next level in writing mastery is just a page away. Are you ready to dive in? So I will leave a link in that to the show notes and look forward to interviewing JP all about that very soon. So in personal news and updates then, as I record this, it is Wednesday the 11th of October, and therefore it's about a month until Vegas. So I thought I would let everybody know that I will be doing a Rebel meetup on the Monday evening, so probably 7:30ish on the Monday, 7:30ish p.m. Monday, and I will identify a location very soon. But if you're interested in doing a Rebel meetup and coming to see me, then please just drop me an email and I will make sure I pop you on a communications list so that you get all the info about where we're going to meet. And yeah, I would love to see you in Vegas. And speaking of Vegas, I have now started work on my talk, finally. I have been trying to deal with the imposter syndrome monsters and all of the rest of it. And the way that I managed to get over it is to buy myself a treat and then refuse to let myself have this treat until I have finished the presentation. So the treat arrived yesterday, and all of a sudden I was very motivated to get it done and tell the imposter syndrome monsters to fuck off. So that is where I'm at. I am probably about halfway through, I think, and yeah, feeling more confident. Isn't it funny? Every time you just start doing something, you feel better. Action is always the answer, literally always the answer. It drives me nuts, but it's very, very true. So I'm hoping to finish the first draft of that today or tomorrow, probably tomorrow now, I think. And in terms of other news, so I have decided to write the next book. I have courses that I have been working on, and I am going to continue to work on them. But at the moment, the fiction is giving me so much joy that I just want to keep following the joy. So I am going to be working on the next fiction book. And then working on the courses in the in-between moments. So that is the thing that I was not sure if I was going to say last week, but it is where I am at now. So, and I have definitely 100% made that decision. So I am working on my vampire romance at the moment, and I am also working on actually 3 different courses in the background, but I can't commit to a release date because I don't know when I'm going to release them. And it feels hard saying that because I want to release them, but I also want to continue following Joy. So here we are. That's just me being honest. That's where I'm at. I'm going to continue prioritizing the fiction for now. And yeah, it is what it is. The thing is as well, I'm learning so much from doing this and so much marketing. I'm learning so much about marketing, so much about business, that I do feel like there are more non-fiction things that I want to do, but like, you know, you have to get to the point where you're at the tipping point, right? You have enough, you know what the hook is, you know what it is that you want to say. And I don't right now. And I think it's because I'm still collecting information. I'm still collecting experience. I don't have enough. I haven't hit the, what is that word? It's like the, someone's going to be screaming at the podcast trying to give me the word, but I just can't think of it. It's like the I can't even give an analogy. I'm like, if only you could see me gesturing wildly into the air trying to explain what I'm trying to say. But anyway, so yeah, this is where I'm at. I'm currently working on outlining the vampire romance. I'm hoping to start this week. If I don't start this week, I will start next week. And in the meantime, I have been building the course structure for Know Your Market. And I think what will probably end up happening is that I end up filming towards the end of the year. So it's not going to be out before November, which is what I really wanted to happen. But it is what it is, you know, like I am refusing to not do the things that bring me the greatest joy. And that is where we are at. Okay. I think that's it for my personal update. So I'm just going to move straight on. All of the week this week is Beatrice Bradshaw. Beatrice says, "It all started with my divorce in 2008 when I was 31. Although amicable, it wasn't easy. I wasn't in love anymore, but I really liked the guy. We had got used to each other and built a life together after nearly 10 years. But as soon as he moved out, he moved on and instantly made a baby with his colleague. Oh. After I got settled in my new place and had just started to live my own life, doing all the things I didn't get to do in my 20s, like lots of shots, I got diagnosed with cervical cancer in 2011. Oh, fuck. Well, that sucked. Roughly 1 year of several surgeries and treatments later, including chemo and radiotherapy, and almost losing my lower legs because of a complication called compartment syndrome. Holy fuck. I went on a world trip for 6 months and danced my ass off in South America. Yay! Carnival in Rio, highly recommended. Everybody glitters. But upon my return, my grandparents got increasingly sick and frail. I had mostly grown up with them, so we were very close. My grandpa was diagnosed with Parkinson's. My gran had cardiovascular disease and a weak heart after a heart attack years before. I took care of them as best I could because I loved those two wee people more than anything in the world. It was an honour, but it was also excruciatingly draining, and yet I would do it again in a heartbeat. They both passed, oh no, away within 7 months of each other in 2016 and 17. Oh, after being married for 61 years. I felt very lost and alone in the world. Overall, I lost 7 friends and relatives within 6 years. Jesus. And then my 18-year-old cat, Gizmo, who had diabetes for quite a while, died too. You wouldn't do that to any character in a book. Honestly, after all that, I was unspeakably exhausted and something cracked. I literally thought, fuck it. On a whim, I decided to follow my heart, to sell all my stuff, to leave everything behind, my friends, my job, my flat, and move from Berlin to Scotland. It didn't make any sense, but it was the best decision ever. The people are amazing, so warm and welcoming. I now live in the vibrant city of Glasgow and I'm about to finish university. I'm 46, by the way, and alongside my undergraduate history dissertation, I'm writing my very first romance novel under my pen name, Beatrice Bradshaw. I love that. I'm still alive and I'm thriving. How's that for rebellious? Oh my goodness me. I absolutely love this story. What a heartbreaking story. But what a triumph at the end. Like, I love that you have continued to fight and you are changing your life and making your life exactly what you want and full of joy. I think this was incredible and super uplifting. So thank you so much for sharing that story. You would like to be a Rebel of the Week? Please do send in your story. It can be any kind of rebellion, something big, something small, or something in between. Please do send in the stories. You know they're my favourite part of the week. And we are always running low, like literally always. So please do send them in. You can send your story to Becca over on rebelauthorpodcast@gmail.com. No new patrons today, but a huge thank you to all of my existing patrons. If you would like to support the show and get early access to all of the episodes, as well as bonus content like tonight, where we're having a movie night on Zoom, then you can from as little as $2 a month by visiting patreon.com/Sasha Black. Okay, that's it from me this week. Let's get on with the episode. Hello and welcome to the Rebel Author Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Paulette Stout. Paulette is the fearless author of fast-paced contemporary women's fiction tackling social issues often ignored. With Paulette's books, readers get bingeable prose, relatable characters, and compelling stories that keep pages turning. Her 10-book award recognitions span both of her titles, Love Only Better and What We Never Say, adding to her 3 media industry awards, including a Media Week All-Star. You can usually find Paulette rearranging words into pleasing patterns while wearing grammar t-shirts at her home in Acton, Massachusetts. Hello and welcome.
Hello. I'm super excited to be with you.
Oh, shucks. I'm happy for you to be here too. Would you like to tell everyone, before we dive into the content, about you and your journey? Like, how did you get to where you are today?
So I think the first time someone told me they thought I was a good writer, it was a boss I had. And I was super surprised because at the time, I worked in advertising, I work in marketing still. And at the time I was writing these really boring quarterly reports and I was getting bored writing them. So I just really dove into the language and tried to make them sound compelling every quarter, even though they were basically saying the same thing over and over. And him saying that just kind of triggered, maybe I could do that, So at the time I was reading a lot of mystery. So I tried a mystery book. And of course, my office mate said it should be in the occult. So that's what it was. And it was kind of garbagey. So that went into a drawer and I started again. And for 17 years, I wrote the book of my heart. And I think I was afraid. I was afraid to take it forward. It was about my own intimate life and the struggles I was having at the time, finishing in the bedroom, as it were. And it wasn't until I got laid off in 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic. And I was like, screw it. I'm doing it. This is my path. And I dove into indie publishing and I just became like the student of all things. And I found Joanna Penn's podcast. I found you, Sasha. I've been a huge fan since then. I'm in the Patreon, folks, so you should go join. And I took a Nick Stevenson course and just all this, all the things. So by the end, I just became such a fierce advocate for all things indie publishing and all it represents about, independence and empowerment and, owning your future and your words and your work. And it just so resonates with me. So, I ended up, go ahead.
You spent 17 years writing one book. Let's just roll back to this one. 17 years writing the same book. Okay, so 2 things. Tell me about that. And secondly, so you mentioned a little bit about kind of the trigger that pushed you into to going down, and maybe tell me more about what was that moment? Was there a moment where you were like, oh my God, I just have to get this done now? Or talk to me about those 2 things.
Well, it was super interesting because I wrote the book at a time in my life when I was at an agency, and I've always felt like a little on the outside, like I didn't quite fit in. So I was a little angry. So when I wrote my first draft of the book, my heroine was a little unlikable because I think she was just a little pissed off because in my life, I was a little pissed off too. So that came through on the page. And so I was going through that and working that through. And, I did query it a little bit now and then, but I just don't think anyone in publishing wanted to go anywhere near orgasm. So I don't think that was
tells you everything, doesn't it?
Yes. So when I got laid off, I had initially started writing a nonfiction book about managing people because I had teams for years. I always loved doing that. I just felt like so many people did it wrong and I had a better way. And I was kind of got tangled up into that. My daughter says, hey, Mom, what about the other book? What about the book you put aside? And I was like, oh, so I went back into it. I was reading it. I'm like, oh my God, I love this book. This is this is the book I wish I had had at the time when I was going through those intimacy struggles, because everything I found at the time was either super dry and clinical or kind of kinky. You want to peek through your fingers. So I needed something in between. And, women's fiction is a little tame. There's lots of closed door situations. And I personally feel, because there's lots of ladies out there not having their fun in the bedroom times, and they just don't even want to go there in their writing either. So I feel like it's a little bit of a mission of my own to kind of make women's fiction a little sexier. So yeah, I just started that journey in 2020 and just, kind of unpacked it. I was following this, not to be like a commercial for Nick Stevenson, but I really did follow the program he had in terms of what you do pre-launch and what you do post-launch and how do you build a community and how do you build your email list and all that stuff. So, and then I just wanted to do it right because I spent so damn long on the book. I just did it big. So I had a PR team and, whatever. And it was amazing. It was an amazing experience. And, I think we'll get into the whole packaging issue, because my first book was like, there was a lot of learning that went on.
Always. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I learned so much from my first, well, not just book, first whole series, but okay, as a fiction author who focuses on taboo topics, how do you even ready yourself for the professional and social consequences of going there in your writing? Can you share some of your personal experiences?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little terrifying, to be honest, because a lot of times when you're writing about a topic that's interesting to you, it's for a reason. Maybe you experienced that in your life, or you had some trauma, or, what have you. So you need to be ready to talk about that. Because when you write a book, I mean, it was for years, I'm writing this book and it's about orgasms, and people are like, and I'm like, and I just didn't even know how to talk about what I was writing about. So I think that one of the first things you do is really kind of figure out for yourself where you're comfortable talking and how personal you want to get, and create some language for yourself so that if someone asks you about what you're writing, you're not only informed, but you're comfortable and prepared about what you want to disclose and what you don't want to disclose. So I think that's the first thing, because I just didn't even know how to talk about what I was writing for so long. And then the issue became, when I came to publish, am I using my own name? Because this was very autobiographical, my book. And, it was like, what my boss is going to think, and what my coworkers are going to think, and what are they going to say at the sidelines at soccer? Oh, there's the orgasm lady. I didn't want to be the orgasm lady. So you just need to be prepared for that. And for me, it ended up, I wanted to be the orgasm lady. And it felt like if I was asking women and readers to take this journey into their intimate life and own it, then I felt like I had to own it. It felt wrong to me, in my case, to use a pen name for this type of book. So if I have a series called Bold Journeys, I just felt like I couldn't hide behind a pen name. And I know that's not everyone's situation. And for some people, it really be necessary and preferable. But for me, it wasn't a choice I was comfortable with. So
did you sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Did you have any consequences in the workplace? Were there any, because if you work in marketing, my assumption is that marketing is quite a corporate space. Were there sort of any comments or any issues in the workplace that you had to deal with when they realized what you were writing about?
Well, that's part of the reason where I felt a little more empowered to write it. When I'm working for myself at my own company, I'm my own boss. But I did have concerns with my clients, because my clients, they love my writing. I write marketing copy for them all the time. So when I was coming in a book, they're like, oh, I want to read whatever you're writing. And then I had to have, the conversation. And people were just so amazing. They were way more open than I expected them to be. They were so encouraging and enthusiastic. Everyone's buying it for everyone's wives and husbands and boyfriends, and they're digging in to get tips. And even the PR agent I had at the time, she was like, I've already used some of the tips from the book with my boyfriend, and yes, they work. And so it was kind of hilarious, because it's detailed, because I did want it to be a little self-helpish, how-to-ish. If you were having trouble in the bedroom, sure, the character's going on her journey and she's getting her something, but you can get your something too, if you're reading the book. So, hey.
We all need something great. Every so often.
Or more than
yeah, exactly. Okay, How do you approach like educating readers through your work? You've talked a little bit about that self-help bit there. But, you know, I think orgasms can be quite a especially in a country like Britain, and I'm not trying to make sweeping generalizations, but we can be pretty prudish here. And it's sort of one of those topics that, like money, actually, in Britain, that is often swept under the carpet. We don't talk about that. You know, you get the, in air quotes, birds and the bees conversation when you're growing up, but we don't often talk about sex and money. So, you know, people are often resistant to that. So yeah, how do you go about it without being preachy, without, you know, pushing people away because they're resistant?
And it's a great question, because for me, I also didn't want to get shoehorned into one topic of women's intimacy, because I feel, you know, my books span lots of different topics. So in terms of the education piece, I like to build empathy and understanding by creating these immersive experiences with the characters, because I feel like it's not my role to tell a reader what to think or how to think. But what I can do is I can create an experience, put them in the body of the protagonist who's experiencing, you know, pain or trauma or difficulties, and through their eyes, they can potentially open their eyes further, you know. And I find that people who are open to those types of messages, you know, kind of emerge from the end of the book change. And I feel like that's way more effective than if I were to take character A and all of a sudden put them on a soapbox. And you can kind of tell when you're reading a book, when the character's in a moment, all of a sudden there's like this little exposition. I'm like, okay, the author's on a soapbox here. You know, for me, that takes me out of the book, and it almost makes me a little more resistant to the message, because I'm annoyed my story is being interrupted. So I feel like if you kind of have it a little more integrated and let the story breathe and let the story unfold, people get those messages on their own. And I feel like that's a far more effective way to change hearts and minds than to be a little more overt about the messaging.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So, let's talk about your personal motivation then as an author. Like, how did you find your why in writing about such taboo and controversial topics? Because it's quite a choice to make.
It is. And I feel like I was bred for this, you know. And I think back to my dad, you know, he, you know, was raised in the 40s and 50s. You know, my family's Jewish, and, you know, he would go to try to find work, and it would be like, you know, Jews need not apply. You know, that, like, they were not hiring Jews when he would go to try and work, and he had to convince them, I can do the job, please hire me, please give me a chance. And that's the environment he grew up in at the time. So, like, when the civil rights movement kind of rolled around, he was all in, you know, he was in Selma and he was marching. So that's the environment I grew up in. And I leaned into that for a time, but now I feel like I'm doing my rebellious work through my work. You know, I'm raising conversations that people don't want to have, whether it's about women's intimacy in my first book. I have a Me Too theme in my second book. The book that'll be out soon takes on race and class, and the one coming up is on body size. So I have like a whole list of ideas of things that I want to talk about, and I feel like that's my why. You know, people need to be talking about so many of these issues more. And I love when I see a comment or someone finishes the book and they're like, oh my God, like, why don't we ever talk about this? Like, why don't we ever talk about women's right to have pleasing, you know, orgasms? Why don't we ever talk about, you know, male survivors of sexual harassment or the life of a Black woman in America? Like, why don't we talk about these things more? You know, so I feel like women's fiction is a really rich tapestry, you know, canvas for me to do that.
When did you come to the realization that was like the driving force for you? Like, do you have any advice for listeners who maybe feel like they want to write about something more or different than what they're currently doing, but they haven't quite maybe like pinned it down, or they're still searching for that like thing that really fires them up? Like, any advice to listeners?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people don't pursue their passions because they're afraid, and that's a common fear. I mean, hell, I was like 17 years with the damn book, you know. The first time I was hiding in the shadows too. But I think if you think about what's the option, like, if you don't do the thing, if you don't talk about that, how would you feel? Would you be regretful if you didn't go there? Would you feel like it was a missed opportunity? Did you feel like you weren't being true to yourself? So I would kind of flip it over and say, how do you feel not doing it? If that's not sitting with you well, then I think you have your answer. Then just go there and accept the consequences, because you could write a book about, dinnerware and puppies and you would still get criticized. So the criticism's coming. So just do what feels right to you and follow your muse. I wholeheartedly encourage people to do that.
Absolutely. Like, I'd rather regret the things I do than the things that I don't. So yeah,
Yes.
I completely agree. Let's talk about research. Like, what are your strategies for research? And how do you, I guess, become enough of a subject matter expert in order to be able to portray something that is taboo or controversial in an accurate way that is also like engaging for fiction? Because sometimes I suppose that's the danger with those of us who do a lot of research for books, is we can end up putting too much into it and they're not reading like a fictional story.
Yeah, I think for me it starts with what expertise do I have already to start with? Like, what's my level where I start? So my first book, I was my subject matter expert because all the things that happened in that book I did, and I loved hearing comments of like, no one would do these things, and I'd be like, yeah, here, this girl, I did all those things. So that was a little bit easier. But as I moved into the other books, and especially my current one, I dive into, the internet searches, I seek out books and I listen to videos. And I think a really great, potentially underutilized strategy is just respectfully listening in social spaces and hearing what the conversations are happening. What are people in those communities talking about? What are these unfiltered experiences that people have? There's one that I put in my current book that I was listening, and it was just, it was a Black woman who would come out of the store and she was just so frustrated that someone was following her around the store like she was going to steal something. That's that raw emotion you get in the moment. And I feel like those become more powerful in a story, more authentic, because they're real and they happen. So definitely do that. Do a lot of interviews. I seek out experts. Sometimes I pay, experts if needed, if that's what it is. And then I work with sensitivity readers. I'm a huge, huge fan of sensitivity readers.
Any advice to listeners about interviewing? Like, how meta is this? I'm doing an interview question about interviewing. But no, like, any advice on maybe finding the right people or pitching people or like, I guess, forming questions or anything? Like, any advice to listeners who maybe have some people they want to approach but aren't quite sure, like, how to initiate that?
My first advice would be do the work before you make the overture to somebody, because it's not their job to educate you on their lived experience. You need to do the work. You need to understand and understand what questions you have. So, and then you can frame it in a way. I'm working on a book. I'm looking for someone who, has this particular experience. Would you be open to working with me? And if so, would there be any charge? Because some people charge and a lot of people don't, but some people do, And I think that's a good way to approach it. And then let them say whether it's the right type of relationship for them or not. But with sensitivity readers, I think some people think of them in the wrong way. I think they think of them as, oh, this person is going to come in and wag a finger at me and tell me what I'm not supposed to be doing. And I think that's the wrong way to think about it, because sensitivity reading is more about listening and finding opportunities and learning outside your own experience and delving into someone else's. So there are so many things you don't know what you don't know if you don't have that identity. And there are simple things, and then there are foundational things that you just may be unaware of. So it's having that insight makes your book richer. It makes your characters more authentic. It makes the communities more open to engaging with your story, not because you're framing them in the wrong way. It's interesting. I can give you an example. I was working with a therapist there's a therapy thread in my second book, and I gave it to her, and I just kind of had this stereotypical therapist in my head who I threw on the page. It's like a Sigmund Freud, old dude with a beard. And then when she was reading it, she said, well, the people in this line of work are really younger. They're working more peer to peer. And that's insight I wouldn't have had if I didn't have that conversation with the therapist about how these types of counseling sessions work. So I, dropped 40 years on my therapist in the book, and it made it like a really interesting conversation when that scene happened. And I felt really good about that. I mean, that's just like one really foundational example, but it's working with sensitivity readers is, for me, it's about adding richness and getting it right. And yes, of course it is, because you don't want people to have uncomfortable experiences reading the book, but it's about so much more than that.
Any advice on finding sensitivity readers? Because I think that's the one bit that authors who are open to, working with sensitivity readers often don't know how to find them. So any advice on that?
I would start with, the people in your life and asking around. If you're in author groups, you can post. Some organizations, like I'm in the Women Fiction Writers Association, and we have an expert list. So if you have expertise in a certain area, there are a lot of associations that may have, an expert criteria. And then you can look, just do internet searches if you feel like the personal connections aren't working out for you, because people will look at that. You can potentially listen on social spaces and, send a note to somebody and say, hey, I really, I'm interested in what you're talking about. Would you be open to having a conversation? It can help me, with a background research I'm doing for a book.
How do you know if you need a sensitivity reader? Like, how do you even approach that? Like, are there certain things that you need to ask them to do? Do you just hand it and be completely open? Like, how do you even work with that?
So I usually give them, specific questions that I'm looking to answer. Did I misrepresent how the situation works or how you feel? Are there any situations that made you uncomfortable? Did anything stand out to you as being problematic? Anything good that happened that I should build on more? Did I misrepresent anything? Like, just some kind of foundational experiences, and kind of leave it open for them to bring the insight to you. Because I find if you're too narrow with it, you might miss things that they would otherwise have mentioned to you. And I think that, like, for me, that's been a good approach. And there are certain, people, if they're very busy, you can narrow them. Okay, I'm looking at these 3 scenes where this happens. I'm talking about, someone who is paralyzed. Is this right? So in terms of figuring out what you need it for, it'd be great for you to have just beta readers of all different backgrounds who can kind of flag things for you. So in my current book, I'm writing a Black female protagonist. And, while I'm a woman of color, I'm not Black. So I've taken special care to get those right, interviews before. They read drafts. They read my first drafts. I never opened my first drafts to anybody, but I felt like if I was going down that road, I needed to know early. So they read many drafts in the book and were very deeply engaged, but you'll find a lot of sensitivity readers. Well, obviously you'll be consulting for them. I think a way to know when to engage one is just thinking about what you're writing. And if you're drafting something and you're trying to make it authentic and you're finding yourself hamstrung by the details, that might be a spot. If you're writing an engagement with a fireman or a police officer or a doctor, and you don't know those things, you don't know what the equipment they use when they extract something. I had a scene with a paramedic, and do they use headlamps when it's dark? Like, how do they, those memes about, authors and their internet searches, but that can be an entree point to identifying when you might need more assistance than an internet search can provide.
Yeah, I love that. There is only so much, like, you don't get that real personal, you get facts and figures, but you don't get that personal, like you say, lived experience, from Google. Okay.
And some of those things are really subtle. So, like, in my book, there was an exchange I wrote between 2 characters, and it was racially charged scene. And my sensory readers were like, that wouldn't have happened that way. That would have happened if it was a Black man there, but not a Black woman. This is what I would experience if I was in that situation. So it can be really subtle things that add depth to your story that you might otherwise have missed.
I love that so much. Have you seen the Barbie movie?
Yes.
Oh,
I'm Team Barbie. You should look at my blog on LinkedIn, the business skills I learned playing Barbie. I'm a very big Barbie advocate.
I love the film. I saw it last night and I was like, oh, this is a masterpiece. Like it was so well written. Like the kind of satirical social commentary was like next level. And like the fact that there are so many people raging about it just made me laugh even harder. Because they've obviously completely missed the point. Anyway, I'm not going to get onto a soapbox about that. But let's talk about branding and taboo. Like being a taboo author, obviously you have to probably be somewhat careful with branding. So like, how did you create your brand? Like, what did you consider? What did you decide to leave out? What did you decide was like important in including in the branding? Like, how did you come to those conclusions?
Well, I think I have a little bit of a leg up because I work in marketing and I have for my whole career. But for me, they talk about branding. Are you branding the books? Are you branding yourself? There's different approaches. So for me,
or even the topic.
The topic, exactly. So for me, I'm trying to create the author brand around me as a writer and also around my brand of storytelling. So you'll get consistent promise of like, you'll get social stuff, you'll get fast prose, you'll get some romance, just those building blocks. But I'm looking for people who are interested in my brand of storytelling. And when I hop around, like, oh, what Paulette's doing this time? They know the type of story they're going to get. They may not know the focus, but they're in, because they want to be entertained and they know they'll breeze through my book in like a day and a half. So that is that. So for me, the visuals of the brand are important. So when I started and I was leaning into the romance more than I should have, and I was using pink as my primary color, and I was using some different typefaces, and then I learned that women's fiction readers don't like pink. They see a pink cover and they run the other way. So I pivoted to navy and whites and golds and greens that were more consistent with the genre expectations. So for me, having crisp and clean visuals and graphics and having it non-verbally conveys that my writing will be tight, that it'll be bold, that there's quality there. And then for me, it's being really consistent from my website to my, my presentations to the signage I have when I'm tabling, social graphics, newsletters, everything is the same. So I feel like if you are consistent and have a look and feel that you embrace as a brand, then it just, even without reading a word, it communicates that you kind of got your crap together and that you're going to deliver something that's as expected. I just feel like even without reading a word, you can tell that. So if you're on your social feed and you've got like all different colors and typefaces and imagery and you do photography and then you don't, and, what's your book like? It kind of communicates something without even having anyone read a page of your book. So I think that it's important for others to be super conscious of the image that they're giving off without people even reading their book, because that's a piece of it. Your brand, Sasha, is super specific, right? With your purple and your white and your gold and your demonic imagery, that's your brand. Even your name, right?
Yeah, I know. Oh God, I don't think I ever even realized that. Yeah, I'm using the color black, and that definitely does represent. Oh shit! How did I not? Do you know that?
Oh, come on now. You never noticed that?
Nope, that was subconscious. The reason I did it is because black is my favorite color. So obviously that makes sense in terms of, yes, okay, that is part of the brand, but it's part of the brand because it's my favorite color. And therefore black and purple, ended up making up the brand. I think, though, that it's interesting that the elements that I have taken into the Ruby Rose stuff, and it's really interesting for me when I do have crossover readers to know like where they feel the voice is similar and where the voice isn't, because The funny thing is, I've been reflecting on that actually the Ruby Row books are probably closer to the nonfiction than the young adult stuff. And so if I were to take anything out, actually, I should have published the Ruby Row stuff. Well, not should have, but if I were going to condense, I would put the Ruby Row stuff under Sacha Black and take the young adult stuff out and have that under a different name. And the reason for that, I suppose, is because Ruby Row is sweary and sexy and dick jokes, or not tit jokes, I should say, and that kind of stuff, rather than the young adult, which was cleaner. So yeah, it's been interesting to kind of look at, and actually, funny enough, there's still a bit of purple in the fiction, and I just can't get away
that's
from
great
it.
because that's consistent for you. I think anyone who finds out who's behind Ruby Row would be like, of course, it's purple.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just glad that it's not a secret anymore.
Yeah, I know it was like when you came out, I was like, oh, came out, you know what I mean? But it was like, oh, she said it was, she said the name of the book. Yeah. So that was fun too. Yeah. But that was an intentional choice, and it was probably the right one,
Yeah, yeah. I was so subconscious as well. So it goes to show that listening to your gut helps. Okay. When we come to writing and publishing, a lot of us want to sell. We often get told that the way to do that is by going center market. But whenever you write about anything that's taboo, it immediately puts you into a niche, and niches are typically not center market. They're usually off center. So, what can we expect when we niche down in terms of like sales? Can you share like maybe some of your experience about setting and managing expectations, and like maybe about trying to chase those sales?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, everyone has to find their audience, and it definitely isn't, going to be as big a market as something, like a cozy something, like you're not going to find as many people, but you'll find your people. It might just take longer, and it just requires way more patience than I have, but I've been forced to to explore those. So I think that if you're taking an unpopular opinion, then that could, create some friction for you in terms of like reviews and ratings and things like that. But I'm honestly surprised that more people aren't offended by my books. I think that if you package it right, people will find you, and then it becomes the balance of your marketing and how you're targeting those people and reaching them in the right way at the right time. And, is your pricing the same, and all the, some of the same things that everybody has, regardless of whether you're touching on something taboo. But it definitely will take you, it may take you longer to find your peeps, so if your author friends will often KU, and I'm wide, which is another thing, but I'm really happy I'm wide. I'm doing phenomenally well with libraries, and I think that there shouldn't be a barrier if your work is good.
Yeah, I think a lot of writing in niche is about understanding where you can locate your readers. So, for example, like, a lot of the big genres like romance, for example, you use Facebook ads because that is where the romance readers are. But when you're talking about like lesbian fantasy, you're not necessarily going to be able to do that on Facebook because there's so many fucking homophobes on there. So the minute you do advertising, you get hit with a load of bullshit homophobia. So it's about like, I suppose for me it's about, have you done the research to find out where people are talking about the books, and wherever they're talking about that kind of genre or that niche, that is where you should be. So yeah, I love that.
I think that you can, if you are a little more open about presenting and talking and doing talks, you can speak directly to readers, or you can learn a lot speaking directly to readers or tabling at events, and, learn where they are, what they like, and then adjust accordingly. So I think it's a kind of a multi-pronged strategy. If you're just hoping to sit home and get ebook sales, that may not be your most effective route.
Yeah, I don't think that's anybody's effective route these days.
Yes.
Okay, how do you navigate genre expectations, particularly when like writing about controversial themes? Are there any particular challenges, and how have you like overcome them?
I think for me, this is where writing women's fiction is really an advantage because, if for people who don't know, women's fiction is defined as a story that is focused on the transformation of the main character. So they begin the book one way, and by the end of the book, they're like a newer, better version of themselves. So I feel like that gives a lot of flexibility from within genre expectations, because that can be historical, that can be paranormal, that can be contemporary, it can have, magical elements, whatever. There's a lot of flexibility there, I think, within the women's fiction genre to explore those. And I think women's fiction readers are definitely, they signed up for some of the heavy stuff, So I think that fits within that too. So I think if you're writing about a taboo topic, I think it's important for you to understand, how to position it within the genre you're choosing. What are your age of your readers and what are they expecting? And is this in line with expectations? And that, also goes to the packaging, because you want your reader promise to be clear so that you'll get readers that will enjoy your work and recommend it to other people.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned earlier a little bit of a lesson that you learned about pink and like kind of the packaging. I just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about, that packaging side, maybe with your marketing expertise and background. Like, how did you approach the fact that you have got these like taboo topics in there? And like, how did you approach getting the packaging right?
Well, I approached getting the packaging right by first getting the packaging wrong. So my editor at the time, it was kind of, I couldn't decide if it was women's fiction or romance. And she's like, leave it to the romance. So I made like a rom-com cover. Like, I'm a marketer. I researched all the trends. I had custom graphics made. And I got this cover, which, it has like this little cute girl. There's a dude with a motorcycle. It's got the scripty font. It just looks like it's all fun. And then it like blew up on NetGalley. And then everyone ran to Goodreads and was like, 1 star. I was like, oh my God, this is horrible. They were just having some nasty girl conversations. And I was devastated because my book hadn't even come out yet. And I already felt like, oh my God, I made the worst thing ever. So I pivoted really quickly. And I think that's great as an indie. You can do that. So I wanted everyone to know that if you're reading this book, that there's going to be lady parts in it. So I have cover number 2, which ended up being like a cross section of a grapefruit. And, anyone reading this would kind of know, okay, lady parts are on board. But then like Amazon was freaking out, like they wouldn't run my ads, or Facebook was freaking out, they wouldn't run my ads. And it became like a whole thing. And then I was like censored, it just became drama. But then if I had to be honest with myself, the grapefruit, it almost looked a little nonfiction-y. Like, I don't know what the reader promise is from that grapefruit cover. Like, I don't know what genre it is, maybe as much. So then I ended up pivoting a third time. And this is, mind you, the third cover within the first 6 months of the book. Because for me, a cover is packaging. A cover is like a box of cereal. So if you sign up for Weetabix, yeah, I'm doing a little British cereal. I'm throwing out my British cereal. If you're signing up for Weetabix and you open it up and there's Tutti Frutti candy cereal inside, you're going to be pissed off. So it's the same thing with your book cover. So getting that right is essential. It's the promise of the book. So I feel like I had to go through those ridiculously bumpy, stupid road to get to the place where I am now, where I have like a theme with my books and the color and they're on genre and everyone loves them. And I sometimes have the problem of people running out and buying the book because they like the cover and they don't even read the book description, and then they're a little horrified. So, so I'm still fighting my little reviews, but that's on you. If you don't read the book description, sorry, folks.
I don't know if you are happy, but I'd love to include all 3 covers in the show notes. Like, if you're happy with that, like for listeners who can't see.
You can do that. Sure.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool. We'll talk about
like Crazy Pants, right?
Yeah. No, I love it. Okay. Patience is often key in this industry, not just with writing controversial topics, although I can imagine it's perhaps even more important. How do you manage expectations and patience, like when you are kind of writing in this controversial area? Like, I am the least fucking patient person I know. So, I'm not very good at this and I can't give any advice about this, but how do you manage it?
Well, I'm the least impatient person I know. Like, I was raised by a guy who would run into the kitchen at restaurants if like they didn't come back fast enough. That's who raised me, the guy who's off getting carted off to jail in a strike, like this is the dude, so I have no patience. Plus, I think I'm genetically at a disadvantage because I ran out and did the Clifton Strength stuff and, folks, you knew it was coming.
I did. I was about
achiever, activator, maximizer, strategic communication competition. Like I ain't patient.
Yeah.
Plus I'm from Manhattan. So none of us are patient. So I feel
what was number one? Sorry, achiever, activator,
maximizer, strategic communication, competition, significance, futuristic, intellection, input.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, you see that competition activator, that is a bitch. Ask me how I know. Especially when you throw in achiever. Yeah, I feel your pain. Yeah.
Thank you, dear. So I'm super not patient at all. I'm awful. I'm one of those people. These checking your dashboards every 5 seconds, and but I had a good learning experience recently because my first audiobook came out this year, and I was just excited about it, and I held back all my marketing until the audiobook came out, and then I was like and then I thought I didn't sell anything. And then I log into my dashboard and I'm used to the Amazon reporting cycle of it's super fast. And the wide stuff isn't the same way. The reporting is delayed. So especially because I seem to be doing so well with libraries, the reporting is a couple months late. So I get it's doing really happy. So that made me feel okay, you're going to have to wait for the data. So you have to chill out. Be patient, just focus on the next thing. So for me, I get stay patient by keeping super busy and working on tons of things at the same time. So I'm never kind of fretting over one thing at the same time. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. ACX drives me insane because it's 4 days out or something. It's so slow. But it's such a pain
for me,
point.
all my stuff is coming from Hoopla. Hoopla loves me, and that's 2 months later. It just pops in out of the blue, and I'm like, what the hell, and then it's exciting because I'm selling around the world. I've sold in 23 countries my books, and so the UK and Canada and New Zealand and all kinds of places, and just exciting because I'm trying to cultivate an audience that's global. So that takes more patience. So it's hard. The struggle is real, but I'm trying.
Absolutely. Well, this is the Rebel Author Podcast. So tell everyone about a time you unleashed your inner rebel.
So I feel like my whole life is rebellious, but I'm going to narrow it in and do a special UK edition of Rebellion. So when I was 17, I lived with a family in Ilford, Essex, and I was, young art student, marketing student, and there was this ad campaign at the time from Smirnoff vodka, and it was walking the dog with a dash of pure Smirnoff and doing this with a dash of pure Smirnoff, and it was just this really cool marketing campaign. So I ended up just skulking around the underground and stealing ads out of the subway cars and just taking them home. And I have so many of these signs. I still have them in the basement somewhere. I don't even know how I got them on the station because they were not quite a meter long, but they were big, some of these signs I was taking. And we would go around the different lines, and the only one I wasn't able to steal one from was the yellow line because their signs were locked up. So my only regret was not being able to steal more, which I guess is rebellious too. But yeah,
definitely rebellious.
So yeah, I was so into Britain. I was watching The Young Ones and EastEnders and the whole, I was all in, So
oh my God,
there you go.
I love it. That is a proper rebellion. That's made me cackle. Okay, tell everyone where they can find out more about you, your books, and anything else that you'd like to add.
So you can find me at paulettestout.com. You can find all my books there and link to media coverage and write reviews, hopefully, folks. If you've read my book, go read and leave a review. And you can find me on social media at Paulette Stout Author on most places. And for the time, I'm on Twitter at Stout Content. So not so long. Don't know how long that'll be there, but that's where I am. I'm mostly on TikTok and Instagram these days at Paulette Stout Author.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And of course, a gigantic thank you to all of the show's listeners and all of the show's patrons. If you would like to get early access to all of the episodes, then you can do so by visiting patreon.com/Sasha Black. I'm Sasha Black. You are listening to Paulette Stout, and this was the Rebel Author Podcast. Next week, I'm talking to Icy Sedgwick all about how to write folklore-inspired fiction. So join me next week for that. Don't forget to tune in and subscribe on your podcatcher. And when you have a moment, please leave a review.